Good evening, friends. Tonight, we won't be marching with legions or debating in senates. Instead, we'll drift into a much quieter, more intimate past. We are going to explore the world of a medieval daughter, a life woven with threads of duty, resilience, and quiet strength. It was a life of constraints, certainly, but also one filled with its own unique textures and rhythms. So, find your favorite spot to rest, dim your lights, and let the sounds of your world begin to fade away. Settle in under your blanket, feeling its gentle weight. Allow your body to grow heavy, soft, and still. Take a slow, deep breath in. If this calm journey helps you unwind, tap the like and subscribe buttons, but only if it feels right. There is no pressure here. Your comfort is all that matters. Let's begin our story. Let's drift back together through the mists of time to a world lit by candle and hearth. Let's imagine the moment it begins, not with a pronouncement or a grand event, but with a sound. The first sound, 1180. The air itself is a character in our story. It's heavy with the scent of wood smoke from the central hearth, a smell that clings to the damp stone walls and the thick woolen tapestries hung to keep out the chill. There's another scent, too, of beeswax from the few sputtering candles, and the metallic, earthy smell of recent exertion. And beneath it all, the faint, sweet perfume of dried lavender and chamomile, strewn amongst the rushes on the floor to ward off foul odors and bring a sense of calm. This cry belongs to a newborn girl. We'll call her Alara. Her arrival is not met with the triumphant cheers that might have greeted a son, an heir to carry on a name and a title. Instead, the reaction is more muted, a mixture of relief, quiet satisfaction, and a pragmatic assessment of the future. The midwife, a woman with hands calloused by a lifetime of such work, wraps the baby not in soft, delicate cotton, but in strips of linen called swaddling clothes. This was common practice across all social strata, from the humblest peasant hut to the most formidable castle. The belief was that a baby's limbs, if left unbound, might grow crooked, or that the child, in its thrashing, might scratch its own eyes or fall into some unseen danger. So imagine Ilara, our little girl, being transformed into a tight, secure bundle. The linen is coarse against her new, sensitive skin. It's not a cruel act, but a practical one, born from a deep-seated fear of the fragility of life. She can't kick her legs or stretch her arms. Her world, in these first few weeks, is one of profound stillness, of being held, of being laid carefully into a cradle. The cradle itself is a heavy wooden thing, perhaps carved by her own father or a local carpenter. It sits on rockers, and the sound that will define her earliest memories is the gentle, rhythmic thump creak, or perhaps an older sibling's. This sound is the metronome of her infancy, a steady beat against the backdrop of household noise, the crackle and spit of the fire, the distant barking of hounds in the bailey. Is blurry, a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. She sees the flickering orange glow of the hearth painting dancing shapes on the high timber bird ceiling. She sees the dark silhouette of her mother leaning over her, a face framed by a simple linen coif. Her world is small, contained, and overwhelmingly sensory. She feels the constant, unyielding pressure of her bindings. Might be her mother's milk, or, if she is of a higher station, the milk of a wet nurse. The choice of a wet nurse wasn't about a mother's convenience in the way we might think of it today. It was often a strategic decision, since breastfeeding was known to act as a natural contraceptive. Handing the baby off to a wet nurse allowed the lady of the house to become pregnant again sooner. Securing the family line, this wet nurse would be a peasant woman from the surrounding village, chosen for her robust health and her own recent, successful childbirth. She would move into the castle, bringing with her the scent of the fields and the sun. Her milk would taste different, perhaps influenced by a diet of dark bread, pottage, and ale. For Ilara, this woman's face, her voice, her touch would become the center of her universe. This was her source of comfort and sustenance. Her own mother, the lady of the castle, might visit her daily, cooing and checking on her progress. But her primary role was not one of hands-on nurturing. It was one of management, of dynasty. And so, from the very beginning, a daughter's life was shaped by these practical, unsentimental arrangements. As the weeks turn into months, Ilara's world begins to expand, inch by careful inch. The swaddling bands are loosened and eventually removed. Imagine the sensation for Hertha, sudden, startling freedom of being able to wiggle her toes, to stretch her little arms, to feel the cool air on her skin. She is still confined, of course, to the nursery or the solar, the private family room. The floor is cold stone, covered with those aromatic rushes. To a crawling baby, this floor is a universe of textures and smells. The rushes are dry and scratchy, and hidden within them are all sorts of interesting things. A dropped wooden bead, colored plastics, no electronic sounds. She might have a small, carved wooden animal, its features smoothed by years of handling. Is a set of smooth, gray stones from the riverbed, cool and heavy in her small hands. Her entertainment isn't manufactured. It is found, created from the world around her. The play is not just for fun. Handling these objects, she learns about weight, texture, and shape. Watching the motes of dust dance in a sunbeam slanting through a high arrow-slit window is a lesson in light and shadow. Her diet, too, is simple. Once weaned from milk, her first foods are soft and mushy. A common dish was something called pap, a bland porridge made from breadcrumbs boiled in water or milk, sometimes sweetened with a precious drop of honey. Honey was the primary sweetener of the age, a luxury that tasted of sunshine and clover. Imagine the first time that intense, floral sweetness touches her tongue, a stark contrast to the savory blandness of her usual fare. She might also have soft cooked vegetables from the castle garden: turnips, carrots, peas mashed into a pulp. Everything is earthy, wholesome, and directly tied to the land on which she lives. There are no jars of baby food shipped from across the country. There is only what the earth of their estate can provide. The dangers of this world are ever present and deeply felt. Infant mortality was tragically high. A simple fever, a cough, a bout of digestive distressfulnesses we now treat with ease could be a death sentence. This is another reason for the perceived lack of sentimentality. To become too attached to an infant who might be gone in a week was a difficult emotional risk. Parents loved their children, of course, but that love was tempered by a grim realism. The spiritual world was seen as just as real and dangerous as the physical one. It was believed that malevolent spirits, fairies, or elves might steal a beautiful, healthy baby and leave a sickly changeling in its place. This is why a child might have a piece of coral or a small cross tied to its cradlean amulet to ward off this unseen evil. The world was full of enchantment and peril, and a daughter, seen as the weaker vessel, was considered particularly vulnerable. Her place within the family is also being subtly defined from these earliest days. She is loved, but she is also an investment. Her brother, if she has one, is the future. He is the land, the title, the name. He will be taught to fight, to hunt, to rule. Ilara is a different kind of asset. She is a potential link, a bridge to another family, her future. Value lies in her ability to forge an alliance through marriage. And so, even as a toddler, taking her first wobbly steps across the cold stone floor, her path is already being paved for her. The qualities that will be prized in her are not aggression or ambition, but obedience, piety, and gentleness. When she cries, she is shushed quickly. When she shows a glimmer of willfulness, it is gently but firmly discouraged. She is taught to be quiet, to be still, to be pleasing. Her world is overwhelmingly female, while her father and brothers are out hunting, training in the yard, or dealing with political matters. She remains inside, in the solar or the women's quarters. Her companions are her mother, her nurse, her sisters, and the other ladies and servants of the household. It is a world of spinning wheels, looms, and needlework, and the soft murmur of female voices sharing stories, gossip, and songs. This is the soup of culture in which she is steeped. The stories she hears are not tales of bold knights winning glory for themselves, but cautionary tales of foolish girls who disobeyed their parents and came to ruin, or hagiographies of female saints who found salvation through their piety. The songs she learns are not rousing battle anthems, but gentle lullabies or sad ballads of lost love. Everything in her environment, from the clothes she wears to the stories she is told, is designed to mold her into a specific type of woman, a good and dutiful daughter who will one day become a good and dutiful wife. Let's picture her now, perhaps 2 or 3 years old. A shaft of sunlight cuts through the gloom, illuminating the dust motes and landing on the great tapestry that covers one wall. This tapestry is her picture book, her television, her internet. It depicts a story, perhaps a biblical scene, or a famous hunt, or a battle from 100 years ago. She doesn't understand the story yet, but she knows the shapes: the proud horse, the fierce lion, the lady with the long golden hair. Her mother sits nearby, her hands busy with an embroidery hoop, and she points to the tapestry. "See, Ilara," she might say, her voice soft and low. "That is the unicorn." Even in this simple moment, a lesson is being imparted. Purity, gentleness, the power of a specific kind of female virtue. These are the ideals she is meant to absorb. She is not the knight fighting the dragon. She is the maiden who tames the mythical beast through her inherent goodness. Her power, she learns, will not come from a sword, but from her character. The world outside the castle walls is a place of mystery to her. She might glimpse it from a high window, the thatched roofs of the village below, the green patchwork, a field stretching to the dark line of the woods. It seems a world away. Her world is the stone, the wood, the wool, the firelight of her home. It's a world of routine, marking the hours for prayer, matins at dawn, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nones, vespers in the evening, and compline before bed. This rhythm sinks deep into her bones, a framework for her entire life. It is a life of order, of predictability, of clearly defined boundaries, and within these boundaries, there are moments of simple, profound joy. The delight of chasing a kitten across the floor, the taste of a wild strawberry, small and intensely sweet, popped into her mouth by a kind servant, the comfort of being scooped up into a warm lap and having a familiar story whispered in her ear as the fire crackles and the wind howls outside. The feeling of the heavy, fur-lined blanket being tucked around her as she is laid in her bed, which might be a simple straw-filled mattress in a small alcove. Her life is not one of abject misery. That is too simple a picture, but it is a life of profound limitation. The threads of her destiny are already being spun by others. She is a cherished piece of a larger design, a valuable tile in a dynastic mosaic, but she is not the artist. From her very first breath in that smoky room, from the moment she was bound in those tight linen strips, her purpose was decided for her. She is a daughter of her time, and her journey has been laid out like a map. She will be taught not how to read the map for herself, but how to follow the path obediently, gracefully, and without complaint. And as she drifts off to sleep in her small bed, the sound of the wind outside, the stone walls might sound like a whisper of the wide world she will never be permitted to explore on her own terms. The scent of the dying fire and the cool, damp air fill the room. Her first chapter, the chapter of the woven cradle, is coming to a close, and her consciousness is sinking into the deep, dreamless quiet of a medieval night. The world is still, waiting for the bells of matins to signal the start of another day, another small step on her predetermined path. As we leave our little Ilara sleeping in her chamber, let your own mind feel that sense of stillness. The world outside your own window can fade away. The only thing that matters now is the gentle rhythm of your own breath, as steady and as soothing as the rocking of that heavy wooden cradle. Been woven, now her world will begin to open up just a little more, not to freedom, but to a new set of duties and expectations. The world of the hornbook and the hearth awaits. Let your mind drift forward a few years. Imagine Ilara is now 7 or 8 years old. The roundness of infancy has given way to the lanky awkwardness of childhood. Her world is no longer confined to the nursery. It has expanded to encompass more of the castle, but her life is still, fundamentally, an indoor one, a life lived within the protective and restrictive stone walls. This is the age where her formal education begins, and it is an education with a very specific purpose. It is not designed to broaden her mind or encourage critical thinking, but to furnish it with the skills and virtues deemed necessary for her future. Roll as a high-born lady. Let's picture her classroom. It isn't a dedicated room with desks and a chalkboard. It might be a corner of the solar, the family's private living space, near a window for light. Or perhaps it's a small, chilly chamber shared with her sisters and the daughters of other high-ranking nobles being fostered in the household. Her tutor is not a university scholar, but likely the castle chaplain, a priest who can instruct her in her letters, or perhaps her own mother, who passes down the knowledge she herself received. Her primary textbook is a curious object called a hornbook. It's not really a book at all. Imagine a small, flat piece of wood, shaped like a paddle or a cutting board with a handle. Tacked onto this board is a piece of parchment or paper, a precious commodity in which a lesson has been written by hand. This might be the alphabet in both lowercase and uppercase letters. Below that, perhaps a list of vowels, some simple syllable combinations like A, B, ib, ob, ub, and finally, the Lord's Prayer. To protect this precious paper from grubby little fingers, a thin, translucent sheet of animal horn was pressed. Over it, the horn was scraped so thin it was almost clear, like a piece of cloudy plastic. This is where the name comes from, the hornbook. It was the medieval equivalent of a durable, laminated flashcard. Imagine Ilara holding this object. The wood is smooth in her hand, the handle worn from use. She squints, trying to make out the letters through the milky, scratched surface of the horn. The chaplain, a man who smells faintly of incense and old parchment, points a bony finger. At the page A, he says, his voice a low drone, B, C. The process is slow, repetitive, rote memorization. There are no colorful picture books, no catchy songs to help her learn. There is only the patient, or sometimes impatient, recitation of the letters, over and over, until they are branded into her memory. It is primarily so she can read her prayer book, her psalter, and follow the services in chapel. Her relationship with the written word is intended to be devotional, not intellectual. While her brother might be learning Latin and rhetoric to prepare him for a life of governance or scholarship, Ilara's academic studies are far more circumscribed. She is being equipped for piety, not for power. The sound of her lessons is the dull tap of the chaplain's finger on the hornbook, the rustle of his robes, the sigh of the wind through the window casement, and her own small voice hesitantly reciting, "Our Father, who art in heaven." But this formal, letter-based education is only a small part of her day. The vast majority of her training takes place not with a book, but with a needle. Needlework was the cornerstone of a noblewoman's education. It was seen as a sign of good breeding, a constructive use of time, and a way to instill the virtues of patience, diligence, and artistry. Here, she sits on a low stool beside her mother, her sisters, and the other ladies of the household. The air here is filled with the steady clack-thump of the large loom where a servant is weaving cloth, and the near-silent whisper of needles passing through fabric. Ilara is not yet trusted with the fine silk threads and expensive linen for the great tapestries. Her task is to learn the basics. She is given a scrap of coarse, undyed linen and a thick woolen thread. Her first lesson is in simple stitches, the running stitch, the cross stitch, the stem stitch. Imagine the frustration. Her small, clumsy fingers struggle to control the needle. She pricks her finger, a tiny, perfect ruby of blood welling up, and she quickly puts it in her mouth to soothe the sting, hoping her mother doesn't notice. The stitches are supposed to be small, even, and straight. Hours are spent hunched over this small square of fabric, her back aching, her eyes straining in the dim light. This is not a hobby. This is her primary work. The great tapestries that adorned the castle walls, the rich vestments for the chapel, the finely embroidered clothes for the family all were produced in-house by the women. Their needlework was a visible symbol of the family's wealth and status. A woman who was a masterful embroiderer was highly prized. While she works, she listens. The women talk. They share household news. They gossip about the goings-on in other noble courts. They tell stories. This is her social education. She learns about kinship networks, about who is married to whom, about old feuds and new alliances. She learns about the reputations of different families. It's an oral education in politics and social strategy, all conducted over the gentle rhythm of the needle. She also learns the feminine arts of household management. She hears her mother discussing the salting of meat for the winter, the best herbs to use for a persistent cough, or how to deal with a lazy servant. She is absorbing the vast and complex knowledge required to run a great household, a skill as vital to her future as her piety or her needlepoint. Let's step away from the noble household for a moment and consider what life would be like for a daughter of a different class. If Ilara were a peasant girl living in the village at the foot of the castle hill, her education would be entirely different. There would be no hornbook, no chaplain. Literacy was a luxury she would never know. Her classroom was the field, the forest, and the one-roomed Watalandob hut she called home. Her teachers were her parents, and her lessons were purely practical. Her first jobs would be simple: scattering feed for the chickens, gathering fallen twigs for the fire, or pulling weeds from the small vegetable patch behind the hut. Imagine her small hands, already becoming chapped and calloused, sorting through the dirt for the tender green shoots of weeds. The smell of the damp earth, the feel of the sun on the back of her neck. This is her sensory world. As she grows older, her responsibilities increase. She learns to milk the family goat or cow, her head pressed against the animal's warm. She learns to churn the milk into butter, her arms aching from the repetitive motion of the plunger. In the wooden churn, she walks to the communal well or the stream, carrying 2 heavy wooden buckets that slosh water down her legs. The weight of this water is a constant feature of her life. She helps her mother grind grain with a heavy stone quern, a back-breaking task that turns wheat into the coarse flour for their daily bread. Her education in the hearth is not about embroidery, but about cooking. She learns to tend the central fire, the heart of the home. She learns how to make pottage, the ubiquitous medieval stew that was the staple of the peasant diet. It was a simple, one-pot meal. Whatever vegetables were available, onions, leeks, cabbage, peas, were thrown into a cauldron of boiling water with some oats or barley to thicken it. If they were lucky, a scrap of bacon or a piece of salted fish might be added for flavor. The pottage pot simmered all day, a perpetual meal that was constantly being added to and eaten from. Imagine her learning to bake bread, not in a sophisticated oven, but on a hot, flat stone placed in the embers of the fire. The bread would be dark, heavy, and dense, made from rye or barley flour, but the smell of it, baking, filling the small, smoky hut, would be one of the most comforting scents in the world. It was the smell of survival, of sustenance. This is the closest thing a peasant girl might get to a medieval Pop-Tart. She would take a bit of leftover dough, fill it with whatever fruit was in season, stewed apples from the gnarled tree in the yard, or a handful of blackberries she picked from the hedgerows. She would fold the dough over, pinch the edges shut, and bake it in the hot ashes. The outside would be slightly charred, the inside a burst of warm, sweet fruit. A moment of simple, rustic pleasure in a life defined by hard labor. For this peasant daughter, her value also lay in her future marriage, but the stakes were different. She would not be forging an alliance between kingdoms, but between families in the same village. Her dowry would not be land or titles, but perhaps a goat, a few chickens, a set of cooking pots, or a hand-woven blanket. Her education was designed to make her a productive partner in a life of subsistence farming. She needed to be strong, healthy, and skilled in all the tasks required to keep a family fed and clothed. Her hands are soft, but they are not idle. Beyond her needlework, she is also expected to learn other genteel accomplishments. Music was one. Imagine her sitting with a tutor, learning to pluck the gut strings to produce a simple, haunting melody. Her fingers, sore from her needlework, must now learn a different kind of dexterity. She learns to sing, her clear, high voice trained to perform the complex polyphony of sacred music or the romantic ballads favored in the court. She also learns to dance. This was not the free-form, expressive dancing we know. Medieval courtly dance was formal, intricate, and full of prescribed steps and patterns. It was another way to display grace, poise, and good breeding. She and the other children would practice. It was a performance, a social ritual, another skill to be deployed in the high-stakes world of the court. In all of this, her own desires, her own interests are secondary. If she has a quick mind and a thirst for knowledge, she will find her hornbook lessons frustratingly simple. If she is athletic and full of energy, she will find the long, still hours of needlework to be a kind of torment. If she is clumsy, she will live in fear of her music or dancing lessons. Curiosity, unless directed toward pious matters, is a vice. Her greatest virtue is her ability to adapt, to obey, to please. Let's pause here in the middle of her education. Picture the two paths. She has a degree of physical freedom, roaming the woods and fields, but her life is a relentless cycle of labor. Her destiny is tied to the soil. Elara, the noble daughter, is protected from physical hardship, but she lives in a gilded cage. Her mind, her body, are truly her own. They are being cultivated for a purpose determined by her father. From childhood to the edge of adolescence is a long, slow process of inscription. The rules of her society are being written onto her, not just into her mind, but into her very body. She is being transformed from a child into a lady. And as we leave her, perhaps sitting by the fire, her needle moving with a little more confidence now, her stitches becoming smaller and more even, we can feel the weight of this education. It is a weight of expectation, of tradition, of a future that is rushing toward her, a future in which she will be the prize. The hearth is warm, the world outside is distant, will shape everything that is to come. Let the scene shift again. The years have continued their silent, steady march. Elara is no longer a child wrestling with a hornbook and a tangled thread. She is now 15, perhaps 16 years old. In the eyes of her world, she is a woman grown, and she has entered the most critical and perilous phase of her life. The long years of education in piety, music, and needlework were not for her own edification. They were the polishing of a precious object before it is put on the market. Her childhood is over. Imagine the change in the air around her. Before, she was a child to be managed and trained. Now, she is an asset to be deployed. The way people look at her has shifted. The gruff men at arms in the bailey, who once might have offered her a gruff, friendly nod, now lower their eyes respectfully as she passes, acutely aware of her status as the Lord's marriageable daughter, replaced by meaningful glances and lowered voices. She is the subject of letters, written in cramped, formal script, sealed with wax, and carried by messengers on tired horses to other great castles hundreds of miles away. She is no longer just Alara. She is a possibility for peace, for land, for power. Her body itself has become a subject of intense scrutiny. Is she healthy? Is her complexion clear? Is she graceful in her movements? Is she developing the womanly figure that promises fertility? Her every public appearance is a kind of audition. When she walks into the great hall for the evening meal, she knows that the eyes of visiting knights, of merchants, of squires are upon her. She must glide, not stride. Her expression must be serene and modest, her eyes cast downward, but not so much as to seem sullen. It's a delicate performance, one she has been trained for her entire life, but which now carries an immense weight. The stone walls are still, cold, but now they are hung with more of her own handiwork, or small, finely stitched panel depicting a scene from the life of a saint. The furniture is still simple, a wooden chest for her clothes, a narrow bed with a woolen blanket and a linen sheet. But there's a new object in the room, a small, polished metal disc that serves as a mirror. It's not the clear, perfect reflection we know. It's a dark, wavy, distorted image, like looking at herself in the back of a spoon. She leans in close, trying to see what others see. She sees her long hair, which is her glory, always kept meticulously brushed and plaited. She sees her face, pale from a life lived indoors. She pinches her cheeks, trying to bring some color to them, a practice officially frowned upon by the church as vanity, but quietly practiced by girls everywhere. She is caught in a paradox. She must be beautiful, but she must not appear to be. Aware of her own beauty, she must be desirable, but utterly chaste. It is an impossible tightrope to walk. The primary mechanism for her future is, of course, the dowry. This was the wealth in the form of land, money, livestock, or valuable goods that a bride's family gave to the groom's family upon marriage. It was not a gift to the couple to help them start their new life. It was, essentially, compensation to the groom's family for taking on the financial burden of supporting her. A girl with a small dowry, no matter how lovely or virtuous, had far fewer prospects. For a king's daughter, a dowry might be an entire province. For Elara, the daughter of a powerful baron, it might be a few valuable manors, a herd of prize cattle, and a chest of silver coins. Her father has been calculating this sum, her value, for her entire life. Now, imagine the arrival of a proposal. It doesn't come in the form of a young man on bended knee. It comes as a formal embassy. A party of riders appears on the horizon, their banner showing the crest of a family from a distant county. They are met with great ceremony at the castle gate and escorted to the great hall. They are not here to see Elada. They are here to see her father. The negotiations take place between the men in private. It's a business transaction. Her father will extol her virtues, her piety, her skill at embroidery, her gentle nature, her robust health. He is, in essence, reading from her resume. The other party will discuss the groom, his lands, his titles, his military prowess, his political connections, and then they will haggle over the price, the dowry. It's a delicate dance of diplomacy and finance. The manor at Oakhaven is productive, her father might say, and its forests are rich with game. The envoy might reply, Lord Geoffrey's lands are vast. He requires a dowry that reflects his station. This could go on for days. Ilara, meanwhile, is kept out of sight, a hidden jewel. She waits in her chambers, her stomach in knots. Her entire future, the person she will spend her life with, the place she will call home, is being decided in a room she cannot enter, by men whose conversation she cannot hear. Can you imagine the profound sense of powerlessness? It's like waiting for exam results, but the subject is your entire existence. Let's say the negotiations are successful. A match is made. Ilara is now betrothed. Her fiancé might be a man she has never met. He might be a boy of 12, in which case they will wait a few years to marry. Or he might be a widower of 40, with children older than she is. His age, his appearance, his character, none of these are primary considerations. The primary consideration is the alliance. Is this marriage good for the family? Does it secure a border? Does it end an old feud? Does it bring the family closer to the king? She is a treaty, sealed with a vow. Now she might finally meet him. The fiancé Lord Geoffrey arrives with his retinue for a formal visit. The entire castle is in a flurry of preparation. The finest tapestries are hung. The floors are strewn with fresh rushes and flowers, and the cooks prepare a magnificent feast. Ilara is dressed in her finest gown, a deep blue wool trimmed with rabbit fur. Her hair is intricately braided with ribbons. She feels less like a girl and more like a carefully decorated effigy. She is brought into the great hall and presented to him. This is the medieval equivalent of a blind date, but with your entire family, his entire retinue, and the future of your lands watching. He is older than she expected, with a weathered face and a thick, gray-streaked beard. He looks her over, not with the eyes of a lover, but with the appraising gaze of a man inspecting a horse he is about to purchase. He is assessing her health, her breeding, her poise. She performs the deep curtsy she has practiced 1,000 times, keeping her eyes demurely lowered. They might exchange a few stiff, formal words. My lady, you are as fair as the reports claimed. My lord, you honor our house with your presence. The conversation is stilted, public, and utterly devoid of genuine connection. What is she feeling? Fear, certainly. A deep, chilling apprehension about this stranger who will soon have complete authority over her life. But also, perhaps, a flicker of something else. Resignation. This is the path she has always known she would walk. There might even be a tiny spark of excitement, not for the man himself, but for the change, for the elevation in status that will come with being the lady of her own castle. It is a complex cocktail of emotions, all of which must be hidden behind a mask of serene composure. The feast that follows is a lavish affair. Minstrels play in the gallery. Servants scurry back and forth with platters of roasted peacock, jellied eels, meat pies shaped like castles, a medieval form of a savory snack we might recognize, like a gourmet hot pocket filled with spiced meat sand. All manner of culinary marvels designed to display wealth. She sits at the high table next to her fiancé, a place of honor. She must eat delicately, taking tiny bites, never speaking unless spoken to, the perfect model of feminine grace. He, meanwhile, might be drinking heavily, laughing loudly with her father, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. They inhabit two completely different worlds, even sitting side by side. Not all daughters were destined for this path, however. There was one other respectable alternative for a high-born woman: the church. If a family had too many daughters and not enough dowry to go around, or a personality deemed too willful or plain, she might be given to the convent. This was often framed as a noble and pious choice, a way for her to become a bride of Christ. But it was rarely a choice she made for herself. It was another strategic decision made by her father, placing a daughter in a powerful convent, perhaps, even with the hope that she might one day become its abbess, was another way to increase a family's influence and prestige. It was also, quite simply, a convenient and honorable way to deal with a surplus daughter. Imagine if this were Ilara's fate. The conversation would be different. Ilara has always been a pious child. Her father might announce, she has no taste for the vanities of the world. Her heart is set on serving God. The process was remarkably similar to arranging a marriage. Her life in the convent would be one of strict routine and enclosure. She would trade her fine clothes for a simple, coarse habit. Her beautiful long hair would be shorn off in a solemn ceremony, symbolizing her renunciation of worldly vanity. Her new family would be the other nuns. Her father would be God, and her groom would be Christ. She would take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, the same virtues, in a more extreme form, that were expected of a wife. For some, this life was a tragedy, a life sentence in a stone prison. For others, it could be a surprising liberation. A convent was one of the very few places in medieval society where a woman could escape the constant physical dangers of childbirth. It was also a place where she could pursue an intellectual life. Many convents had excellent libraries, and nuns were often more literate than their married sisters. They could study, write, compose music, and manage the vast estates and complex business affairs of the convent. An intelligent and ambitious woman, like an abbess, could wield more direct power than almost any married noblewoman. The gilded cage of marriage was swapped for a stone one, but for some, the stone cage offered a different, more cerebral kind of freedom. But for our Ilara, the path is set towards marriage. Lord Geoffrey departs, leaving her with a betrothal ring and a date for the wedding. The months leading up to the ceremony are a whirlwind of activity, but none of it involves her making decisions. The castle's women are now dedicated to preparing her trousseau collection of clothes, linens, and other goods she will take with her to her new home. This was a hugely important display of her family's wealth. Looms clack from dawn till dusk, weaving fine linen for chemises and woolen cloth for gowns. Needles fly, embroidering her family's crest onto everything from bed hangings to handkerchiefs. Ilara sits among them, stitching, but her mind is elsewhere. She is saying a long, slow goodbye to her world, to the familiar view from her window, to the feel of her own bed, to the faces of the servants she has known her whole life, to the comforting presence of her mother. Soon she will be a stranger in a strange land, the mistress of a household that is not her own, wife to a man she barely knows. The toughness of this period is not one of physical hardship, but of profound psychological stress and uncertainty. She is on the brink of fulfilling the one great purpose for which she has been raised, and it is terrifying. She might find moments of quiet rebellion. Perhaps she takes a horse and, accompanied by a trusted servant, rides out farther than she is supposed to, feeling the wind in her hair, a fleeting taste of freedom. Perhaps she has a secret friendship with a stable boy, sharing a whispered joke that is not about piety or duty. These are small, secret acts of selfhood in a life that is increasingly not her own. They are whispers of the person she might have been in a different world. But the day of the wedding draws ever closer. The cage, so carefully constructed and gilded throughout her childhood, is about to open, not to release her into the wild, but to transfer her to another, larger, more permanent cage. She is polished, she is priced, she is promised. Her will is irrelevant. Her heart is a secondary concern. Her duty is all that matters. As she lays in her bed at night, listening to the familiar sounds of her childhood home, she might pray, not just for a kind husband or a safe future, but perhaps for the strength to endure whatever is to come, to play the part she has been assigned with the grace and fortitude that everyone expects of her. Her girlhood is ending, a chapter closing. With the finality of a slammed portcullis, the day arrives as it must. Let's imagine Ilara's wedding day. It dawns not with soft romance, but with a sense of immense, formal gravity. This is not merely a personal celebration. It is a public and political event, a shift in the very landscape of power. The air in the castle is thick with anticipation and the smell of roasting meats and baking bread for the feast to come. For Ilara, the day begins in the cold pre-dawn gloom, not with quiet reflection, but with the hustle and bustle of being prepared. Her ladies-in-waiting, her mother, and her sisters fuss around her. They help her bathe in a wooden tub filled with water that was likely heated over the fire, scented with rose petals and herbs. This is not just for hygiene, it's a ritual purification. She is being made pristine for the transaction. Then comes the dressing, the final act of preparing the prize. Her gown is a masterpiece of the household's wealth. It's not white. The tradition of the white wedding dress is a much later 19th century invention. Her dress would be a deep, rich color, perhaps a crimson or a vibrant blue, made from the most expensive cloth her father could afford, likely velvet or silk brocade, trimmed with fur. It is heavy, layered, and magnificent. It is also restrictive, a beautiful constraint. Her hair, her symbol of maidenhood, is worn long and flowing, perhaps crowned with a simple circlet of gold or a garland of flowers. Once she is a married woman, she will be expected to cover her hair with a veil or an elaborate headdress, a visible sign that she is no longer available, that she belongs to her husband. So this moment, with her hair unbound, is a final, fleeting symbol of her girlhood. She looks at her reflection in that same cloudy metal mirror, but the face staring back seems like a stranger's, a costumed doll ready for the stage. There is no quiet moment with her father, no tearful, heartfelt advice. He is busy, greeting guests, finalizing the last details of the land transfer that is part of her dowry, his mind on politics, not sentiment. The ceremony itself would take place not inside the chapel, but on the church steps, at the church door. This was a public declaration. The entire village, all the tenants, all the visiting nobles would be there to witness it. It was crucial that there be many witnesses to confirm that the marriage was valid and legally binding. Imagine her walking from the castle gate to the chapel, her father's hand firmly on her arm. She is not being given away in a sentimental sense. She is being formally transferred. The crowd murmurs as she passes, commenting on her gown, her beauty, her dowry. She keeps her eyes fixed ahead, her face a mask of calm. At the church door, Lord Geoffrey is waiting, resplendent in his own finery. The priest stands before them. The core of the ceremony, according to the canon law of the time, was the consent of the couple. The priest would ask them, in turn, if they consented to the marriage. Geoffrey, will you have this woman to be your wedded wife, Ilara? Will you have this man to be your wedded husband? This moment of consent was the legal heart of the matter, and here lies one of the great, tragic ironies of a medieval daughter's life. In theory, she had to consent. If she stood on those steps and said, "I do not," the marriage would, in theory, be invalid. But can you imagine the pressure, the sheer impossibility of doing so? To refuse would be to publicly humiliate her father, to insult a powerful noble family, potentially starting a feud or even a war. It would ruin her own reputation, branding her as disobedient and willful. She would likely be disowned or packed off to the harshest, most remote convent her father could find. The choice was no choice at all. It was a formality. Her entire life has been a training exercise in saying, "I do." And so, when the question is asked, her voice is small but clear, "I will." The vows are exchanged. He places a ring on her finger. And then, the most important part of the ceremony for her father, the public declaration of the dowry. The priest or her father would announce the lands, the properties, the money that now passed to the groom's family. It was the public reading of the invoice. With the legalities concluded, they would then move inside the church for a nuptial mass, to bless the union in the eyes of God. The scent of incense would fill the air. The choir would sing, and Allah would kneel beside her new husband, a man whose hand she has barely touched, bound to him for life. The feast that follows is a boisterous, lengthy, and often crude affair. It goes on for hours, sometimes days. It is a celebration of the new alliance. Toasts are drunk, minstrels play loud, celebratory music, and a jester might perform bawdy tricks. Ilara sits at the high table, a beacon of silent sobriety in a sea of drunken revelry. She is the guest of honor, but also an outsider. These are her husband's people, his knights, his vassals. She must smile, she must appear gracious, but she is utterly alone. The food is extravagant. Let's imagine a particularly strange medieval delicacy being served, something to surprise the guests. A cacantris. This was a bizarre dish, the medieval equivalent of a culinary practical joke. A cook would take the front half of a suckling pig and the back half of a large chicken or capon, sew them together, stuff and roast them, and then serve the mythical beast on a platter. It was a display of both culinary skill and conspicuous consumption. Imagine this fantastical creature being placed before her, a symbol of the strange, unnatural joining that her own marriage represents. As the night wears on, the atmosphere becomes more raucous. The final public ritual of the wedding day was the bedding ceremony. This seems shocking to our modern sensibilities, but it was a vital part of the proceedings. The marriage was not considered truly, irrevocably consummated until it was, well, consummated. And to ensure this happened, it was done with witnesses. The bride would be escorted to the bedchamber by her ladies. undressed, and put to bed. The groom would be brought in by his men, often drunk and full of bravado. Then the priest would bless the marriage bed, and the couple would be left alone with the wedding guests, often waiting just outside the door, singing rowdy songs and making jokes. It was a terrifying, humiliating ordeal, a final, brutal stripping away of any privacy or dignity. The public transaction was now a private reality. The cage door has shut and locked behind her. Now, let's rewind and step onto the other path. Let's imagine that instead of a wedding, Ilara's fate was the veil. The ceremony of becoming a nun was, in its own way, as formal and binding as a wedding. It was her marriage to Christ. Instead of a lavish gown, she would be dressed as a bride, perhaps in a simple white dress, symbolizing her purity. She would walk down the aisle of the convent chapel, not on her father's arm, but perhaps escorted by 2 older nuns. The bishop or an abbot would preside. The core of the ceremony was her profession of vows. She would promise poverty, renouncing all personal possessions, even her fine clothes, chastity, the spiritual counterpart to marital fidelity, and obedience to the abbess, the same obedience she would have owed her husband. After she made her vows, the most dramatic part of the ritual would occur, the cutting of her hair. The bishop would take a pair of scissors and shear off her long braids, the symbol of her worldly vanity. This act, the tonsure, was a physical sign of her break with her old life. Imagine the cool slide of the metal, the soft fall of her hair to the stone floor. It was a moment of profound finality. She would then be stripped of her bridal dress and clothed in the simple, rough habit of the order. A veil would be placed on her head, not the delicate wisp of a bride, but a heavy, opaque veil that signified her enclosure from the world. The other nuns would sing hymns welcoming their new sister. The doors of the convent would be symbolically closed. She was now, in the eyes of the world, dead to it. Her old name might even be replaced with a new, saintly name. Ilara no longer exists. She is now Sister Agnes or Sister Hildegard. Her new life would be governed by the bell. The bell would wake her long before dawn for matins. The bell would call her to prayer 7 more times throughout the day. It would call her to her simple, silent meals in the refectory, where one nun would read from a holy text while the others ate. Imagine the quiet of that room. The only sounds, the scrape of spoons on wooden bowls, and the drone of the reader's voice. Their diet was simple, often vegetarian dark bread, cheese, vegetable pottage, and weak ale, a life of deliberate austerity. Her work would be varied. She would spend hours in the chapel, in collective and private prayer. She might work in the convent's infirmary, tending to the sick with herbal remedies. She might work in the scriptorium, the library, and copying room. This was the intellectual heart of the convent. Here, she could learn to write, not just a simple hand, but the beautiful, illuminated calligraphy used in sacred manuscripts. Imagine her hunched over a desk, a quill in her hand, carefully copying the text of a gospel. Her world shrunk to the small, perfect space of the parchment before her. She could mix the paints for the illuminations, grinding lapis lazuli for a brilliant blue or malachite for green. In this quiet, focused work, she might find a sense of purpose and artistry that a life of managing a household could never provide. The abbess, her new mother and master, was often a formidable figure. She was typically a woman of high birth, herself a skilled politician and administrator who ran the convent and its extensive land holdings. Like a feudal lord, she was the one to whom Ilara now owed absolute obedience. The community of nuns would become her new family. It was a life of intense female community, with all the support and all the potential for petty jealousies and conflicts that such a close-knit environment implies. So we have these two vows, and a public bedding, leading to a life as a wife and mother, a life of social power but personal subordination, of wealth but constant, dangerous childbearing. The veil of the bride is exchanged for the veil of the wife, signaling her husband's ownership, or the vow of chastity, sealed with the shearing of hair and the closing of a door, leading to a life of spiritual devotion and potential intellectual freedom, but also of strict enclosure and austerity. The veil of the bride is exchanged for the veil of the nun, signaling her separation from the world. For the medieval daughter, these were the two primary, respectable endpoints of her upbringing. Both involved a total surrender of her will to a higher authority, a husband or an abbess. Both were transactions arranged by her father for the benefit of the family. Both were gilded cages, one furnished with tapestries and airs, the other with manuscripts and prayers. Let's leave Ilara, or Sister Agnes, at the threshold of this new life. Whether she is lying in a strange bed next to a strange man in a strange castle, listening to the drunken revels finally dying down outside her door, or lying on a simple straw pallet in a cold convent cell, listening to the first pre-dawn bell, calling her to prayer, her childhood is definitively over. The path has forked, and she has been pushed down one of its two branches. The toughness of her life is no longer about potential. It is about the reality she must now inhabit day after day for the rest of her life. The world has shrunk to the size of a castle's walls or a convent's enclosure, and within that space she must now find a way to live, to survive, and perhaps to find her own small measures of peace and purpose. Let's follow the path of the married daughter. Our Ilara is no longer Ilara, the maiden, but Lady Ilara, the wife of Lord Geoffrey. She has moved to his castle, a place that may be larger or smaller, grander or more rustic than her childhood home, but is in every way alien to her. The faces are new, the customs are different, the very stones seem to hold a different chill. She is the stranger, the outsider, and she must now carve out her place as the mistress of this new domain. Her life has entered its central, most demanding chapter. She is now the chatelaine, the keeper of the keys. This role was not one of leisure. We have a romantic image of the lady of the castle sitting in a high tower, sighing and composing poetry. The reality was far more akin to being the CEO of a large, complex, and perpetually demanding corporation. Her husband, the Lord, was the chairman of the board, concerned with the big picture, warfare, politics, and high-level justice. But she was the chief operating officer, responsible for the day-to-day running of the entire enterprise. And the symbol of her office was the heavy ring of keys that she now wore hooked to her girdle. Imagine the weight of those keys, iron, heavy, and cold, clanking softly as she walked. Each key represented a domain of her responsibility. The key to the larder, where the food supplies were stored. The key to the storerooms, holding bolts of cloth, barrels of wine, and sacks of grain. The key to the spice chest, a locked box containing the most precious and expensive commodities in the household: pepper, cloves, cinnamon, and sugar, all worth a fortune and locked away like treasure. These keys were her badge of office, a constant, physical reminder of her duties. Her day would begin before sunrise, in a cold bedchamber. While her husband might be out hunting or training, her work began inside. After her morning prayers, her first task would be to unlock those storerooms and dispense the necessary supplies for the day. She would meet with her head cook to plan the meals, not just for her family, a simple task, but for the entire household, which could number in the dozens or even hundreds. Knights, squires, men-at-arms, servants, stable hands, visiting guests, all had to be fed. This required immense logistical skill. How much bread needed to be baked, how many chickens slaughtered, how much ale drawn from the barrels. She had to calculate all of this, ensuring nothing was wasted, while also making sure the provisions would last through the lean months of winter. Let's follow her on her morning rounds. She moves through the castle, her keys jingling. She enters the cavernous kitchen, a place of intense heat, smoke, and noise. Boys are turning spits over the massive fire, pots are bubbling, and the air is thick with the smell of roasting meat and wood smoke. She inspects the work, her eyes sharp for cleanliness and efficiency. She might check the quality of the flour or taste the pottage to ensure it is properly seasoned. From the kitchen, she might proceed to the buttery, not where butter was made, but where the butts or barrels of wine and ale were stored. She would oversee the dispensing of the daily ration of drink for the household. Then, on to the weaving rooms, where she would supervise the women who were spinning, weaving, and sewing. She would inspect the quality of the cloth, assign tasks, and ensure the mending of old clothes was being done. Her own fine embroidery skills were now put to a managerial use. She was the quality controller for all the textiles in the castle. A huge part of her role was healthcare. The castle was far from any real doctor, and the lady of the house was expected to be the resident physician and pharmacist. She would have an extensive knowledge of herbal medicine, passed down through generations of women. Her private garden, the herbarium, was her pharmacy. She would cultivate lavender for headaches, chamomile for calming nerves, yarrow to stop bleeding, and comfrey to set broken bones. Imagine her in this garden, the sun on her back, crushing a mint leaf between her fingers, releasing its sharp, clean scent. She would know how to make poultices, salves, and infusions. When a servant fell ill, or a knight was wounded in a training accident, it was Lady Ilara they would come to be a nurse, a doctor, and a comforter. Her soft hands, now skilled in dressing wounds and doling out remedies. Her life was a constant whirl of management. She had to manage the staff, settling disputes, assigning duties, and doling out discipline. She had to manage the household finances, keeping careful accounts of every expenditure. She had to be a gracious hostess to a constant stream of visitors' messengers, traveling nobles, merchants, who all needed to be housed and fed according to their station. When her husband was away, which was often on military campaigns or at the king's court, the entire responsibility for the defense and running of the castle fell to her. She would have to command the garrison, oversee the watch, and make decisions that could mean the life or death of everyone within the walls. She was no delicate flower, she was a commander, and threaded through all of this the central, overwhelming pressure of her life, the duty to produce an heir, preferably a male heir. Her marriage was a dynastic contract, and her fertility was its most important clause. The entire household would be watching and waiting. If she was slow to conceive, whispers would start, prayers would be offered, pilgrimages might be made to the shrines of saints associated with fertility. She might be given strange potions or instructed to follow folk rituals, all in the hope of quickening a child in her womb. When she finally did conceive, it would be a moment of great celebration, but also the beginning of 9 months of profound fear. Pregnancy was perilous, and childbirth was the most dangerous moment in a woman's life. It was often called the woman's battlefield, and the mortality rate for both mother and child was terrifyingly high. There were no anesthetics, no understanding of germs or infection. The birth would take place in her chamber, which would be sealed off, the windows covered, to create a dark, womb-like environment. The midwife would be summoned, and the other women of the household would gather to support her. The men, including her husband, were banished. This was a woman's world, a world of pain, prayer, and blood. Imagine the scene: Alara in labor, gripping twisted linens for strength, the air hot. If the birth was straightforward, there was immense relief. If there were complications, it was a desperate, terrifying struggle. A baby in the wrong position, a failure to progress, excessive bleeding, any of these could be fatal. She was fighting for her life and the life of her child. If she survived, and the baby was born healthy, the next critical moment was the announcement of its gender. If the cry of "it is a boy" rang out, the castle would erupt in celebration. If the cry was "it is a girl," the reaction would be far more subdued. Relief that mother and child were safe, of course, but also a quiet disappointment. The daughter was loved, but the dynastic duty remained unfulfilled. The chatelaine would be expected to get pregnant again as soon as possible. To continue the fight for a son, her life would become a cycle of pregnancies, births, and nursing, one after the other, year after year, a relentless strain on her body. Many women died young, worn out by frequent childbirth. Her relationship with her husband, Lord Geoffrey, would likely not be a romantic one. It was a partnership based on duty and dynasty. He might respect her skill as a manager. He might be fond of her. Their moments of intimacy were often goal-oriented, aimed at producing children. She owed him the marital debt. Her body was not her own. Yet, within this formal structure, a deep and abiding affection could grow. A shared life, shared dangers, and shared children could forge a powerful bond of companionship and mutual reliance. Amidst the immense responsibilities, there were moments of pleasure and autonomy. She was the queen of her own domestic realm. The great hall was her court. She could patronize a traveling minstrel whose songs she enjoyed. She could order the planting of a new rose garden simply because she liked the flowers. She could show special favor to a servant she was fond of. These were small assertions of her will, but they were meaningful. And her relationships with her children, while often interrupted by the demands of her role and the use of wet nurses, could be a source of profound love and joy. She would oversee their education, just as her mother had overseen hers, passing down the lessons of the hornbook and the hearth, preparing her own daughters for the same life she was leading. Let's imagine a specific, quiet moment. The day is done. The last of the servants has gone to bed. The great hall is empty, save for the sleeping dogs by the embers of the fire. Ilara is alone, walking slowly through the silent hall. The moonlight streams through the high windows, painting silver rectangles on the stone floor. The tapestries she and her mother made hang on the walls, their colors muted in the darkness. She can hear the wind whistling around the battlements. In this moment of quiet, the weight of the keys on her belt feels heavier than ever. She is the guardian of this sleeping world, the keeper of its future. She has food in the larder, a male heir sleeping in the nursery, and strong walls to keep the dangers of the world at bay. She has fulfilled her duty. The toughness of this life was its relentless pressure and its profound lack personal freedom. Her body was a vessel for the next generation. She was powerful, yes, but her power was entirely contingent on her role as a wife and mother. She was not Lady Ilara. She was the lady of the castle, the wife of Lord Geoffrey. Her identity was subsumed by her function, and as she finally makes her way to her own bed, she might feel a sense of deep, weary satisfaction, but also the ghost of the girl she once was, the girl who dreamed of things other than the price of pepper and the mending of linen. She has traded the gilded cage of her youth for the larger, more responsible cage of womanhood, and within its bars, she has found a life of purpose, a life of duty, a life of keys. Let us let the wheel of time turn one last time. Decades have passed, the world has changed, yet in many ways it remains the same. Our Ilara is no longer the young bride or the busy chatelaine. She is an older woman now, perhaps in her 50s or 60s. To have reached this age in the medieval world was, and the general harshness of medieval life. She is now a matriarch, a repository of wisdom and experience. Imagine her now. Her face is a map of her life, etched with the fine lines of past smiles and worries. Her movements are slower, her back perhaps a little bent, but her eyes are as sharp as ever. She sits in a comfortable chair by the fire in the solar, the same room where she once learned her letters. The heavy ring of keys no longer hangs from her belt. She has passed them on, with great ceremony, to her son's wife, the new chatelaine. Her role has shifted from active manager to revered advisor. Her position is one of quiet, understated power. Her voice carries immense weight in the family council. Her son, now a powerful lord in his own right, on delicate political negotiations, on the characters of the men he must deal with. She has seen it all before. She remembers the old feuds, the old alliances, the promises made and broken. Her memory is a living archive of the family's history, more valuable than any written charter. Her days are no longer a whirlwind of activity. They have settled into a gentle, predictable rhythm. She spends long hours at her needlework, but now it is not a task, but a pleasure. She creates intricate, beautiful pieces, her gnarled fingers still surprisingly nimble. She might be working on a new altar cloth for the chapel, or a baptismal gown for a new grandchild. Her stitches are tiny and perfect, a lifetime of practice culminating in these final, beautiful works. Each stitch is a meditation, a moment to reflect. Her greatest joy is her grandchildren. She is the soft lap, the teller of stories, the keeper of secrets, while their own mother is busy with the demanding role of the chatelaine. It is the grandmother who has the time for them. She teaches the little girls their first clumsy stitches, her patience now deep and endless. She teaches them the names of the herbs in the garden. She tells them the stories of the saints, but also the old, the warrior, and of their father as a mischievous little boy. In this role, she is weaving the final threads of her legacy. It is not a legacy written in stone or recorded in the Chronicles of Kings. The official histories will remember her husband, Lord Geoffrey, and her son, Lord Thomas. They will record their battles, their treaties, their land holdings. Her own name, Ilara, might appear only once in a marriage contract. The said Geoffrey did take to wife Ilara, daughter of Baron Fitzalan. She is a footnote in the official story, but the true history of the family, the history of its survival and prosperity, is woven into the tapestries she helped create. She was the one who managed the wealth that paid for the armies. She was the one who healed the sick, who worked the fields. She was the one who gave birth to the heir, who continued the line. Her work was the essential, invisible foundation upon which the great deeds of men were built. The toughness of her old age is this profound anonymity, this historical erasure. She was the engine of the household, the heart of the family, but her contributions were seen as natural, domestic, and therefore unworthy of official record. Let's imagine a specific scene. It's a cool autumn afternoon. Ilara is sitting with her eldest granddaughter, a girl of about 10 named Eleanor, after her. They are sorting dried lavender, its calming, floral scent filling the air. Eleanor is frustrated with her embroidery, just as Ilara once was. "I'll never get it right," she sighs, throwing down the hoop. Elara smiles, a gentle, knowing smile. She doesn't scold, she simply picks up the hoop. "Look here," she says, her voice soft and a little raspy with age. "You are pulling the thread too tight. You must persuade it, not force it, like so." She makes a few effortless, perfect stitches, her hands moving with an economy of motion that is beautiful to watch. Patience, little one. A good seamstress, like a good lady, knows that patience and a gentle hand can shape the strongest cloth. In this small domestic moment, she is passing on the core lesson of her own life, how to wield power and create beauty within a world of rigid constraints. What if she had taken the other path? What if she had become Sister Agnes in the convent? Her old age would be different, but also a position of respect. She would be one of the senior nuns, her life a testament to decades of devotion. She might be the convent's cellarer, in charge of all its provisions, a role remarkably similar to the chatelaine she never was. Or perhaps her literacy and intelligence led her to become the chantress, in charge of the choir and the library, a position of great artistic and scholarly authority. Or maybe, just maybe, her wisdom, piety, and noble birth led her to be elected as the abbess. In this role, she would be one of the most powerful women in the land. She would be a feudal lord in her own right, controlling vast estates, presiding over her own courts, and dealing with bishops and barons as an equal. Abbess Agnes would sit not in a quiet solar, but in a great hall, making decisions that affected the lives of hundreds of people. Her name would be recorded in the chronicles. The convent would be her legacy. This path, the path of the veil, offered a different kind of fulfillment, a power that was not derived from a husband, but from God and her own abilities. It was a different kind of echo left in the tapestry of history. But let's return to our Lady Alara. Her life has been one of service to her father, her husband, her children. It has been a life defined by the word duty. Has she been happy? It's a modern question, and perhaps the wrong one to ask. She has known great sorrow, the loss of children in infancy, the death of her husband, the constant worry of war and famine. But she has also known profound satisfaction, the sight of a full larder in winter, the birth of a healthy son, the respect of her people, the love of her grandchildren. Her life has had a clear and unwavering purpose. Within the stone walls of her world, she has been the anchor, the center, the steady hand. Let's picture her one last time. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the room. The fire crackles, a sound that has been the constant soundtrack of her entire existence. From her cradle to this very moment, her granddaughter has fallen asleep, her head in each lap, the forgotten embroidery hoop on the floor beside them. Elara gently strokes the girl's hair. She looks into the flames, and what does she see? She sees the faces of all the people she has known, the tapestry of her own long, eventful life. She sees the girl she was, full of fear and apprehension. She sees the young woman, weighed down by keys and responsibility. And she sees the woman she is now, a survivor, a matriarch. Her life was not easy. It was a constant negotiation with a world that sought to define and confine her. She was a political pawn, a vessel for dynasty, a domestic manager. But within that gilded cage, she found a way to build a life of meaning and influence. Her power was soft, her history whispered, but it was real. Her legacy is not a statue in the square, but the quiet, continuing hum of a well-run household, the laughter of children in the courtyard, the strength of a family line that she secured. She is an echo in the tapestry. You can't always see her clearly. She is often in the background, her face partially obscured by the great deeds of the knights and kings who dominate the foreground. But if you look closely, you can see the results of her work everywhere, in the richness of the thread, the strength of the weave, the harmony of the colors. The tapestry would be a pale and flimsy thing without her. Her story, and the stories of millions of daughters like her, is the quiet, essential, and deeply human heart of the medieval world. And as the fire burns low, and the old woman and the young girl sleep, a quiet peace settles over the castle. The day is done, the story is told. The echo remains. May these memories of a life lived with quiet strength and resilience guide you now into your own peaceful dreams. The struggles of that distant world can fade away, leaving only a sense of calm and stillness. The tough, unyielding duties are done for the day. Now there is only rest. If you drifted off somewhere along our journey, I hope it was to a peaceful place. Feel free to let me know in the comments below where you last remember our story. Your presence here is deeply appreciated. Sweet dreams, boring history for sleep. Signing off.